When you look at the animal kingdom, every species seems to fit perfectly. Fish have gills for the water. Birds have hollow bones for the sky. Polar bears are built for the ice. They've all spent millions of years becoming perfectly tailored to this planet. And then there's us. We're this strange species that gets sunburned by its own star, whose skeleton groans under its own gravity, and who just can't shake the feeling that something is a little off.
So that's really the big question we're diving into here. If evolution is all about adapting and surviving, why do we humans seem so poorly designed for our own home planet? It's a mystery.
And this isn't just about physical stuff like bad backs. It's deeper than that. It's a feeling, right? This sort of deep-seated consciousness that we don't totally belong here. You don't see any other animal staring up at the stars wondering if that's where they came from. As far as we know, we're the only species on Earth that feels existentially homeless.
To really get to the bottom of this feeling, we have to look at the evidence. So, let's start by building the case against ourselves. Let's go through the catalog of all the ways our bodies and minds seem to be, for lack of a better word, malfunctioning.
Just look at this list. It's quite a rap sheet, isn't it? It covers everything from the physical pain we feel just from existing, to the psychological burden of being self-aware, and even to how we treat the planet itself. Let's zoom in on a couple of the most obvious ones.
This is just staggering. An incredible 80% of humans, that's 4 out of every 5 of us, will deal with chronic back pain. When your species has a fundamental design flaw that affects the vast majority of its members, you've got to start asking some questions about the original blueprint. Our spines are basically what happens when evolution takes a structure meant to be a horizontal bridge and decides to stand it straight up.
And this part right here, this really shows how bizarre we are. For most of human history, giving birth was one of the deadliest things a woman could do. Now, compare that to a horse. The whole ordeal is over in about half an hour, and the newborn foal is up and walking minutes later. Our babies, on the other hand, show up completely helpless, and they stay that way for years.
Now, what's so fascinating about this is what it implies. It suggests there's a real conflict between our internal systems and our external environment. For nearly a third of all people, the immune system, the very thing designed to protect us, goes to war with totally harmless stuff like pollen or peanuts. It's almost like our bodies were calibrated for a different planet entirely.
But maybe the biggest malfunction of all isn't in our bodies, it's in our heads. We are the only creatures we know of that are cursed with the knowledge of our own death. What possible evolutionary advantage could that have? It seems to do nothing but create this deep existential terror. And so we build entire civilizations, religions, philosophies, all as a massive coping mechanism for being an animal that knows its time is up. Okay, so you take all these oddities together, the bad backs, the dangerous childbirth, the existential dread, and it's all so profoundly weird that it led some very serious thinkers to a pretty radical conclusion. What if the reason we don't fit in here is because we're not from here? And listen, this isn't some fringe idea from the depths of the internet. This comes from Francis Crick, the guy, literally the guy, who co-discovered the double helix structure of DNA. The man who unlocked the code of life itself looked at the whole story and basically said, you know what, this doesn't add up. He called his theory directed panspermia. The core idea is that the first sparks of life on Earth, and maybe even humanity itself, weren't an accident. They were sent here, on purpose, by someone or something else. Now, I know it sounds like a movie plot, but his reasoning was actually grounded in some pretty suspicious timing in our planet's early days. So here's the thing. Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago, and for the first few 100 million years, it was a boiling, molten nightmare. But then, almost the second it was cool enough to support life, boom, there it was. Complex life appeared in just 700 million years. Now that might sound like a long time, but in geological terms, it's the blink of an eye. And that speed, that's always made a lot of biologists just a little bit suspicious. Of course, mainstream science has its own powerful and maybe more believable explanation for all our strange quirks. And it doesn't need any aliens or ancient starships. It's a concept called evolutionary mismatch theory.
The idea here is that our flaws aren't clues to an alien origin. They're actually scars from a very rapid and messy evolutionary history. Our back pain? That's just because we stood up on 2 legs very recently and our spines haven't quite caught up. Sunburns? That's the trade-off for losing our fur, which let us sweat and cool down to become marathon hunters. And our incredibly dangerous childbirth? That's the ultimate compromise between a pelvis small enough for walking upright and a head big enough for our giant brains.
We're not aliens. We're just a prototype that got way too smart way too fast.
And that seems to wrap it all up pretty neatly, right? Case closed. Well, not quite. Because there is one massive piece of this puzzle that even mismatch theory really struggles to explain. There's one variable that nothing else on this planet has ever come close to matching: the absolutely unbelievable speed of our progress.
Just think about this for a second. For millions of years, our species' greatest technological achievement was hitting one rock with another rock to make it sharper. Then, in what amounts to a geological heartbeat, we went from the first rickety airplane to putting rovers on Mars. I mean, the internet didn't even exist 35 years ago. Nothing in the entire 4 billion-year history of life on Earth has ever moved like this. It's a vertical line.
And to put that into perspective, dolphins are wildly intelligent. They've been around for 50 million years, and in all that time, they have created exactly 0 tools. Chimpanzees, our closest relatives, have been using the same basic sticks to get termites for 4 million years without a single software update. So how on earth did we go from banging rocks to building artificial intelligence?
So, what was it? What was the spark? Scientists have their theories, of course, the invention of complex language, the discovery of fire and cooking which fueled our growing brains, maybe one lucky genetic mutation. And all of those things probably played a huge role. But does any single one of them really truly explain the exponential, runaway train of human development? It's still a very open question.
And that brings us right back to the central mystery. After we've weighed all the evidence, from our faulty spines to our godlike minds, we are left staring at the biggest question of all. What exactly are we?
Now, to be perfectly clear, the evidence for our evolution here on Earth is incredibly strong. Mismatch theory does a great job explaining most of our weirdness. We are almost certainly a product of this planet, but almost certainly is not the same as definitely. And when a Nobel Prize winner who decoded life itself says something doesn't add up, it's probably worth listening to. So maybe that uniquely human feeling, that restlessness, that constant drive to build and explore, that deep-seated need to look up at the night sky, maybe it's not a flaw in our evolutionary code. Maybe it's a feature. Maybe it's a clue, a kind of echo of a home we've long forgotten.
In the end, whether we're just a very clever ape that got too smart for its own good, or the descendants of some ancient cosmic message in a bottle, we, without a doubt, this planet's greatest puzzle. We are a species that is perfectly imperfect, caught forever between the mud we came from and the stars we can't stop reaching for.